Hey everyone, J-Rob Plays here, and today I'm going to be going over the Shadowshaper event. I mentioned the Shadowshaper event during my last Duel Rising video, and from here, if you go to the events page to the Shadowmaster Invitational, you can then start to go into the stages. Just hit go and it'll take you into the stages, and you start with Mishra. Now, normally I would cover everything, but in this case, Mishra was kind of over before it began for me. I thought initially that you were going to have to beat these duelists by 30 to get the harder to get items, but it's just to finish with a power over 30. So it was just such a quick duel. I can't really give you really good insights on it, but Bazinet I had a little bit more time with because she was a little bit more challenging. And in order to tell what you're in for, you can come up here to the top right and click on this little icon, and you can see that she's going to be using a deck with Hive, and it's focused on getting the Paradoxical Neophyte out, which then summons the Shade, and the Shade will then get power based on the amount of units that have Inspired, which are going to be also gaining power. So it's a high power deck. You want to make sure that you're limiting her ability to have Inspired units out, and you also want to make sure that you're building up your units so that you have enough power to be over 30. And the reason I mention that is because the Mu Ying deck is a good deck at preventing her from keeping units on the board. It's got a lot of ability between the Exploding Shanks and being able to attack with Vandals, doing the additional damage, so you can actually take out a big unit. And then of course you have Ikora, and you have the Elite Walkers to take out units regularly as well, buffing them with your servitor. So this is a pretty good deck in general if you're talking about control, like kind of, I would say map control, but it's more like a table control, deck control. So the decks that require a bunch of units to operate properly kind of don't get out of hand. So this would be like good to use against like a line deck, for example, to break up the line, column decks as well. And in her case, we'll be facing, again, a Hive deck that's going to be trying to stack Inspired units in order to buff the final unit. And then, of course, you also have to worry about the Tomb Ship. The Tomb Ship will then sometimes pop up these Shades, which then get buffs as well, and it can get really out of hand sometimes if they get lucky on you. So I recommend the Ayala deck, and the reason I recommend this is it's a Cabal deck that is a column deck, and it has some nuance to it, so you have to really pay attention to how you're building it. You want to try to build the deck in a way that you're catty-cornering the cards, so you're kind of having the cards sit between two cards and getting both of the back cards buffs. So you put the buffing cards in the back, and you put the buffed cards in the front that you want to buff up, and try to kind of balance them out like bowling pins, for example, is a good way to think about it. And the reason, again, why you do that and you want to try to balance it that way is because you can share the effects across 3 cards instead of just the front and back card. And then once you have them all built up, anything that has a column setup will get 3 power to this. So if you've got a nice column setup and then you drop Burr and he shifts everything over to where all of your back column will kind of go catty corner to your front column, which then busts everything in the front, then busts it again because of Burr's exotic power, that's how you have a nice win. And even with this deck, you have the ability to buff things directly. You have the ability to protect from damage if you're going to have something that's damaging them between the Colossus here, like we talked about, and the flanks. And then you also have the ability to do damage to units. And some of these are worded inappropriately. Like I think the Juggernaut actually does damage. It doesn't just like buff damage. I think you can pick something with this as long as it has its column perk, and you'll be able to attack something across. So some of these cards do things that their descriptions don't necessarily say that they do. So they just have to kind of practice with them. Now I'm going to go over the game in which I got the additional rewards with Bazinet so you can kind of see what I did. So starting out the duel, you want to make sure that you're keeping a duel. And by I say keeping it, like not going in and surrendering so that you can get a good setup, that you have an actual start. So if you have a bunch of cards that are all 3s and you're not going to have anything in the first 2 rounds, you're probably going to want to just turn in that duel, because it's going to end up usually in you losing when you have a few rounds in which you can't put anything down. Even against human players, it's really hard to come back from not having that first or second round. And a lot of times if you're playing the similar cards, so for me, I like the line deck. If I'm playing it against the line deck and I get the defense and they have the offensive coin flip, usually they're going to win because they can take out my units as I lay them down with their line. So as you can see here, I've started building the column, and what I'm going to try to do is catty corner these cards in a way that they're set up kind of like I mentioned earlier, like bowling pins. And right now, the benefit that I had 2 cards that just happened to be set up in sets, and so now I have 2 nice columns set up, and if I could find a card to wedge between them, that's going to allow me to take advantage of its effect, but also allow me to link them all. So now I've got 5 cards down, and I have 4 links, as you see there, and I'm getting the benefit to all of those cards around there. And what I tend to do too is you'll notice I'm checking ahead to see what cards I have and how I'm going to play them. And so now I've got the card where I'm going to be buffing the 2 cards to my sides. Yes, it does take away from the card at the top, but now I've got 3 nice columns. I've got my 2 side cards buffed. I'm keeping up a little bit with the score, and I know that I have Burr coming, and I did pull Burr, which is great. And so now what I can do is I can make it to where the front row and the back row are offset, and Burr buffs everything around it. And I also get the additional buffs from all of the linked corners. So now I've got 6 linked corners, and I've got a score of 70. And that's kind of how you want to structure your fight against this deck, and just kind of keep playing until you get a similar situation. And you can set that up where either you have 4 in the front, 3 in the back, or 3 in the front, 4 in the back. Okay, so now let's talk about Pandora. So the Pandora deck is going to be a human deck, and it's going to hinge on Kabir buffing all of the gorilla units. And so similarly to the first few decks, you want to try to make sure you're controlling the battlefield, especially against the human deck, because it can spawn a lot of other gorilla cards, and you're not going to be able to keep up with them. And once Kabir drops, it's going to buff all of them, and that'll end up in a loss. And so you want to, again, balance taking those cards down at the same time building up your score, because again, you have to be over 30. Now, the Hive deck is a really good deck to do that with, because of the fact that you can get the Inspire units out early, and they can build up your score very easily. And then if you do it right, when you summon the Shade will get you that over 30. And as long as you're ahead of Pandora, that's going to be an easy way to win. Now, this Donovan deck here, this one's also going to be very similar in the sense of getting your score up, because you'll be able to get the catch that summons dregs, and then you'll be able to buff the dregs with your captains. You have your Unrelenting Captain, you have your Resilient Captain that's going to get you more dregs out onto the field. And then, of course, you can just drop your normal ones here and kind of use these to deal damage, or use these to deal damage and prevent your enemy from overwhelming you with their units. But the big deal is that if you get Fallen on your field and you cover your whole field and you drop Vanok, Vanok's going to buff everything by 2, and that's going to basically win you the game. And so this was the deck that I ended up going with in order to try and get the 30 win, while getting the win still at the same time, right, being over 30. And I believe I got to like around 70-ish with this deck because of that setup that I was talking about. So let's go through that as well. So again, you want to make sure that you choose a duel that you have a good start in. And so I already have a good start. I have 2 lower light cards that I can place in the first 2 rounds. I am going to start off with the Unrelenting Captain. So each dreg deployed is going to get additional power. And as you see here, I'm eyeing a combo already. I see on round 4, as you see, I'll be able to drop the dreg that gets power for every unit played. And then I'll be able to drop behind that. The Fallen Catch is also going to be able to produce these dregs to get power from the captain that I have down. So I'm getting power to the dreg that gets bonus from having enemies summoned in that, or allies summoned in that row, should I say. And then I'm getting a bonus to each of the dregs summoned behind it. Yes, it fills up the row, but your enemy will sometimes get some kills, which are going to free up you to be able to drop more in that row. But even if you max that row out, that's again just more cards that you have out there on the field that Vanok can take advantage of and buff later in the fight. And so what I'm thinking of just how am I going to reduce the amount of gorillas out there on the field so I can keep Kabir from being a factor later on in the fight. And I got another drag out there from the damage that I did too, by the way, which is the ability of the other captain. And so now I'm just trying to make sure that I have the ability to keep their gorillas minimized. Maybe I was even trying to see, hopefully it could have taken out the tan. And those damages you saw got me more dregs in the back. So I'm all set. And I'm in a situation now where that spider tank's not going to hurt me, because I can drop my card before the spider tank attacks, getting all of those buffs out there, getting me to that 70, and then the spider tank attacks, and that allows me to get the fight and win the fight. And so again, that's the deck that I recommend, and I would recommend anybody still struggling to get that additional win when you have the high score and the win to get your additional sheaf in order to do that. And this is going to be coverage for Bazinet and Pandora. I'm going to be making separate videos in pairs so that you can see what I did for the future duelist and be able to also emulate that and get your rewards. So overall, I hope that this video was helpful to those out there who are going to be utilizing it to get the rewards. Thanks very much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next video.